I've already rested. I'm ready to go. I wouldn't really wish this upon anybody because it takes a lot of adjustment. That's what it does. Well, you know, you're still young. You know, wait till you're. I'm 61. You know, wait till you're my age. Okay, I'm going to give a little. I'm going to give a little bit of context for what we're going to talk about. Okay, and then please interject extemporaneously, and I'll respond. You know, from my heart, and then I'll go back to the content. Okay, if you feel to interject. Okay, I don't need to run off on a discourse. I don't have an agenda. I'm just here with you. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That ma- that ma- okay. That makes a lot of sense, and I'll try to pay attention. Where when I speak, you'll wait for a little while to respond so that it doesn't interfere with the Skype video, and I'll try to do the same. I'll try to, you know, mold myself to the video delay so I won't respond so quickly to what you respond to. And what that does, it allows us to actually it's okay. But this little delay that we're talking about to accommodate the Skype, that allows us to abide in silence together for a moment. Yeah, you got it. Okay. So when I pause, I'm just abiding is what I'm doing. Okay. I know you know. Okay, so I'll begin by just, first of all, thanking you for being so open, and I really appreciate the email correspondence we've had for the last 10 days or so. And I also want to thank Jonas, our mutual friend, who had the guidance to put us in touch with each other. Because I don't think Jonas would agree with all of our conversations, because Jonas is a unique character and he has his own path, part of which intersects with you and me, and part of it which doesn't. Oh yeah, it's a beautiful mystery. So it's through Jonas, and it was through Jonas that my wife and I, Magdalena, when we met Jonas in 1992, it was through him that we were heard about the beloved Robert Adams. And after we had spent 2 seasons consecutively with Punjaji in Lucknow, India, Jonas said, "You know, Marty and Magdalena, you don't have to go to India. There's a Gyani that's living in LA." So that's how the Leela started with Robert Adams. And so my wife and I, and a Korean girl who was very advanced soul, I think Robert came to Sedona not just for me, but for this Korean girl, because I think she's very humble. I think Robert gave her the full wake-up call, is what I think. But me and my wife and this Korean girl would make the pilgrimage to Los Angeles almost every weekend for a year, starting in 1995. And because we just recognized the depth of his realization. I meant to say 1995. Did I say 1985? Yeah. Yeah, and you were in Prescott in 1995, weren't you? Okay, so you can see, you know, the cusp of our karmas. We're on the cusp, and it took 22 years later for us to meet on the Skype, okay, rather than meeting in Sedona. It's interesting. It's like me missing Ananda Moyama by one day. So the first time that we met Robert Adams, the first song, we sat right in front of him, 3 feet from him. He gave the transmission of non-dual silence right away. We received it. And afterwards he wanted to find out who we were and where we were from. And we told him our names, and we were from Sedona, Arizona. And he said, "Whoa, I'm going to move there." And his attendant at the time, Ed Musica, Ed Musica is now doing. I saw him on an interview a few years ago at Buddha at the Gas Pump. I don't know if you're aware of that website. Yeah, Ed's an interesting character. Ed said to us, "Oh, don't worry about Robert. He says that to everybody. He says he's going to move. Everyone who comes from out of town, he says he's going to move." And the funny thing is that Ed was the one who drove Robert from LA to Phoenix. And Ed was unable to drive him for various reasons from Phoenix to Sedona. Another couple drove him from Phoenix to Sedona, Hale and Amy Dwoskin. Hale is the lineage holder of the Sedona method. Okay, yeah. So Hale, after Lester Levinson died in 1994, was also going to see Robert in LA in 1995 along with us. So Hale moved up from Phoenix to become part of the Sangha. And Hale always wanted my wife and I and the Korean girl to learn Lester Levinson's work. I don't know if I should say this, but I'm going to say it. Robert told me that I didn't need it. And he said, and God forbid Hale never sees this video, but Robert told me, maybe he just told it because of who I was. He said, all that's going on there is that the gross ego is releasing into the subtle ego. And the subtle ego is releasing even into the more subtle ego, or the more subtle I thought. And Robert said, you don't need it. So I just followed the advice of my guru, and I told Hal I wasn't interested. Very interesting kind of leela that was going on around Robert. But anyway, Ed could not, for various reasons, bring Robert up to Sedona, and he lived with me and my wife and this Korean girl to kind of check it out. And so we all lived in the same house together, and I can only say it was off the scale. Yeah, it was off the scale. You ever seen those M.C. Escher engravings? I think he was a German carver, lithograph carver. Do you know what I'm talking about? No, well, it's very visionary, and one of the visionary like he dealt with images and mirages and patterns, where he would draw things and you could see it one way or the other. So you could see two images within one image. Okay, and he may be more popular in Europe, but I was an art major in the university, so I was aware of all these different, artist movements and art history and things. So there's a picture of M.C. Escher's work where the face is unraveling like in a ribbon. And that was what it was like living with Robert. It was like there was an unraveling of the I thought going on all the time. Yeah. But anyway, Ed Musica said he felt like he was Moses. He wasn't allowed to come to the Holy Land because Moses brought the children of Israel to the boundary of the Holy Land, and then he left and went away and died someplace. So it was really a funny comment coming from Ed. Ed never came to Sedona ever again. He never came to Sedona. He stayed, because Robert went back to LA and told his Sangha, maybe not more than 30 people, everyone should move to Sedona right now. Everyone should move. Only 2 people moved, Mary Skeen and Karen Goldman. And they were the only ones that followed his instructions. And they became part of the Sedona Sangha. And at first I invited everybody that I knew to come and sit with him. And my house is probably filled with 30 or 40 people. And Robert began his transmission of silence in his discourse. He was having a little bit of hard time talking because he had a speech impediment because of his neurological condition. Maybe. I don't know. I'd have to see the video. Well, his wife never in her whole life attended any of Robert's satsangs until she moved with him to Sedona. And Robert told her, as part of coming to Sedona, you have to come and sit with me like everybody else. Yeah, she's Jamaican, but she has light skin, and she kind of, I think she is, but if you want, I can find out how to reach her. The woman who was Robert's caregiver, Adele, who was Graham's wife, you understand their connection, Graham, from the Pyrenees in Spain, who I thought he was the only one that I could share these things that I'm sharing you with, sharing with you. His girlfriend, who later became his wife, and Graham moved to Sedona to be part of the Sangha. People came from all over the world to be with Robert at his last 2 years of his life. People from London, people from the Gangaji satsang, people from Zen Buddhism came, people from... Yeah, Stuart was there. He was from the Sedona Method group. How was that? How was that? Yeah. So who gave the satsang, you or Stuart? Uh-huh. Yeah, you have to understand, from my reference point, you can't hold a candle to Robert Adams. I had Robert had a natural awakening without any teachers or any techniques, just like Ramana did, about the same age that Ramana did. And you probably know the story. Ramana used to visit him when he was a child in Mudikar. Yeah. And his parents, when he was a teenager, didn't know what to do with him. You know this story? Yeah. He had a city. He had some kind of city, but his parents knew that there was something not right with this teenager, and because he just sort of slipped into the realization of the big self without having any teacher or conceptual reference point. And they sent him to a teacher in New York City called Joel Goldsmith or Goldstein or something like that. And Joel didn't know what to do with him, so he sent him back to his parents. And his parents heard about Yogananda in Encinitas, California. They sent him to Yogananda. And Yogananda had met Ramana Maharshi. You can see it in Autobiography of a Yogi. Okay. So Yogananda took one look at Robert, read his energy, and said, "You're not a yogi, you're a jnani. I'm going to send you to Ramana Maharshi in South India, the holy mountain of Arunachala." So that's how Robert got to Ramana Maharshi. And Robert told me the story. He said that um, when he got to Ramana Ashram, Ramana was still walking on the mountain in the morning with his walking stick. And Robert went up the mountain to greet him, and he took off all his clothes. He was naked. And he put his clothes in a bundle, and he prostrated in front of the Maharshi, Ramana Maharshi. And Ramana bent down, picked him up, because Ramana was like, 72, Robert was 18, so Ramana was like his grandfather, and told him to put his clothes on and that he was welcome to stay at the ashram as long as he wanted to, and they walked down the mountain together, hand in hand. And so Robert was just a teenager, Ramana had people like, Arthur Osborne and Paul Brunton and Papaji, a whole slew of, highly mature, more aged, adepts and adherents on the path. Robert was just a teenager that slipped into this and was learning about this at the feet of the master. So he spent 3 years with Ramana Maharshi. He did a lot of traveling in between. He went to go see Papa Ram Das. I'm sure that he's met Neem Karoli Baba and Ananda Moinla and many others. Yeah. So anyway, Robert ended up traveling in India for many years after that, just wandering like a holy man, And someone at the ashram gave him some money, and he was able to live off this money for many years. Eventually, I don't know when, because Robert didn't like to talk about his past, because he wasn't just in LA. He was in Oregon, he was in Colorado, he was in Florida, he was in the Bahamas. I don't know where else he was. But he would always appear and then disappear when there got to be more than 25 or 30 people. He thought that was too many people, so he would just leave in the middle of the night. And sometimes he was with his wife and his 2 kids, and sometimes he wasn't. He wasn't really integrated into like the business world of supporting a family and kids. He was an embodiment of the self as a young boy who never had any formal training, to support himself like you and me. So anyway, getting back to LA, I just saw that what came out of Robert's mouth when he spoke or when he acted was just the action of the self. There was no thinking involved in it. There was no mind that actually translated thought into action. It was just the self speech, the self action. There was no mental dialogue or you know what I'm saying. So that's why he said, I may move to Sedona. It just came out of the abyss of his own heart. So a year later, I get a call on the phone because we'd become quite close. When for a year, we would make pilgrimage to LA. We'd fly in on Thursday night to go to Thursday night satsang. And then he would invite me and my wife and this Korean girl, Michi, to either have lunch with him on Friday at the health food store or breakfast with him on Saturday. Never twice, but just one or the other. And then we would go for a walk in the park. And during one of the walks in the park, I remember saying, Robert, why aren't we all living together? Why? He said, it's not time yet. It's not time yet. Huh? I said, Robert, why aren't we all living together? And he said, it's not time yet. So we had to be visiting him for another 6 months before he called me on the phone and said, I'm coming to Sedona, I want to check it out. I want to get out of LA. Because he was in the earthquake, the 1992 Northridge earthquake, and it was really bad. But there was another time when we first met him and we went to breakfast with him on Saturday morning. and I felt like I had this obligation to tell him the various. There were like 3 other teachers that we were with. One who was half cooked, who was a cult leader, but we thought he had the full thing. But we were young. I was like, 25 when I met this guy, or maybe younger than that. No, I was 27. I was 27 when I met him. My wife had been with him for eight years, and by the time we spent 2 years with him, my wife and I were both convinced that we had to escape this whole thing. So that's how we moved to Sedona, sort of, escaping this friend of hers that had this partial awakening on one of the Maharishi's long courses in Switzerland. So I wanted to tell Robert. I'm giving you a context. I wanted to tell Robert about our experiences with this gentleman and 2 other fully cooked masters that we spent time with. And Robert said, "I'm not interested. I don't know anything about your past." Which I thought was interesting, because he just wanted to ground you in the eternal now. He didn't want you to wander around in your mind. So anyway, Robert moved to Sedona, spent some time with us living. He invited his wife to come and stay. She stayed for 1 night, and then she went to Texas to be with her children. Robert made the decision, after kind of holding, satsang at our house informally with just 3 of us, that he was going to move here 30 days later. So that's when he went back to LA, told everybody to move to Sedona, and only 2 of his devotees moved. And then the Leela just kind of started. So I will check that video online. You'll have to show me where it is, maybe through email. You can do that. I'd like to see where. Well, I haven't heard any Robert Adams satsangs for over 10 years, so this would be a nice thing for me to do. Yeah, thank you. So I just want to tell you a little tiny story, which is what I was going to begin the interview with. I didn't know I was going to go give a little bit of I think I had to give a little bit of a background because of your interest in Robert. I hope it was useful. Okay. No. I mean, he has about, maybe 50 or 100 videos. I mean, audios. I don't know if you have his audios. Oh, okay, because supposedly only Nicole, his wife, is authorized. She thinks she's the only one authorized to sell these audios. But I didn't know that Stuart had access to them. I didn't know. Whatever you want to do. I don't have any concern, anyway. But I love Nicole. But she had never seen Robert do a satsang until she came to our house, the first satsang. And when she saw what was happening, she started crying. And, this was her initiation into the truth of who her husband was. Because this may sound ludicrous, but I don't think she really ever knew who her husband was. She knew he was sort of an eccentric character, but she was his wife and the mother to his 2 children first, before she was a devotee. I never heard that story, but thank you for sharing that. That's great. And I got to know Nicole very well because she handled the finances of Robert. He didn't touch money. He just didn't touch money. And Earth Wisdom Tours, my little, Dharmic tour company where we took people out into the land and did our things with them, we supported Robert and paid for his expenses anonymously. Because that's the way it was done in India. You just did this for the good of the sangha. That's what you did. But she always had her hands in the money pot. So So I always had contact, with his wife Nicole. And she kind of became very fond of me and my wife. She would call my wife Mirabai. And that was the name that Punjaji gave my wife. She gave my wife the name Mirabai, and he gave me the name Govinda. I never used the name Govinda until when I came to Hawaii, because it was too strange, because I was in business, I was a public figure, in Sedona. It's a small town. It just would have caused too many complications. But anyway, Nicole was very graced to live her life around Vigyani. Yeah. So the last thing I'll say, and then we'll go into the material that you were wanting to evoke from me, is there was, on Wednesday afternoons, you could see Robert in private. Anybody could see him, and he was there for them. For, just private interview, hanging out, or questions, inquiry, whatever, it didn't matter. And I remember sitting in the room with him one Wednesday afternoon. I said, Robert, you don't really even need to look at me, do you? And he says, yeah, I can turn my back and have my back facing you, and it's the same. Robert had no proximity to his body or location. So he didn't need to look at you through his eyes. He was everywhere. So he could be in another room, or he could turn his back against you, and he could look out the window while you were looking at his back, and you would get the same transmission, whether he was looking at you or not. That's a very advanced state of realization. So what he gave me during that little interview was one of the revelations that I'll speak about in point C. There's 3 points. There's the rainbow body that I'll share with you. There's the out-of-body experience, which I call the end-all. That's the word that came to me, that this is the end-all of existence. And then there's the revelations. And the revelations, we may or may not have time to go through them. You'll have to let me know if we feel we should go to part C. That may be a totally different Skype. It may be more, you'll just have to make that decision. I'm not going to make. Yeah. But I'm just saying that that's one of the revelations, part C, that Robert gave me, and also another master gave me the same thing. So it was like, the revelations are seed, truth transmissions that we all have. You have them, your wife has them, Jonas has them, Graham has them, Robert's wife has them. And I don't know if people realize it or not, but they're actually deposited in the heart. And as you evolve, and as you go through your sadhana, and also as you suffer, they become fertilized, and they come out of the chit, the Sat Chit Ananda, the chit, the storehouse of impressions. They come out of the chit, and they are watered by your life experiences. And also, for me, it was watered by my suffering that I went through. And then they ripen, and they bear fruit in your awareness, and they become not just memories. At first, they're just memories, but then the memories transfigure themselves, sort of like what happens with the rainbow body. The rainbow body gets transfigured. The memory's transfigured, and they come to the surface, and then they become your part of your repertoire of your living experience. Does that make any sense? Mm-hmm. Right. Well, it's interesting what you say, because the transmissions that I got from Dzogchen, which is what I'm going to talk about, the rainbow body, the transmission that I got is that the nature of the mind is non-dual, but also the nature of the body is non-dual. And that we may be saying the same thing, that the body dissolves. It can only dissolve because it itself in its essence is non-dual. We may be saying the same thing from different views. I'm just receiving that now. There may be no conflict in what we're saying, but we're just saying it from a slightly different view. But I'm responding to what you just said. Where did you think what I called the seed transmissions of truth, they didn't dissolve for me, they became enlivened, because they're eternal. They're not something that's transitory. Right. Yeah. The revelation. The revelation. Yeah. 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 Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And that's, of course, the job of Robert Adams and all the teachers that you've met in India and all the teachers I met, is there comes a stage where you have to kill the Buddha. You have to leave the lineage, you have to leave the teacher, the outer guru or the outer master. His whole job, he doesn't tell you this, you have to discover it for yourself, is to push you back into the inner guru or the inner master, so that you're not attached to a lineage or a teacher. And this has been the pattern throughout the ages. Same pattern. Because if you don't take that final journey like inward, which eventually ends up, as you know, there is no inward or outer. It's just a concept. Outer pushes you into the inner. If you don't do that, then the teacher and the lineage actually become an obscuration. Yeah, yeah. So very, very insightful. So you end up going into conflict. And conflict is an ego mechanism to keep you separate from the truth and separate from other human beings. Yeah. So I have a lot of Dharma brothers and Dharma sisters that are attached to their lineage right now. And they're holding on really strongly because they're getting older and they're fearful. And the holding, the grasping, of course, we know, is attachment, it's desire. And so they're using the spiritual, quote, world to further their grasping and their attachment. But on a subtle, very subtle level, it's giving the ego a sense of self-importance, is what it's doing. And this goes back to the material that I began to share with you about, where you said, oh, I see what you're talking about in terms of pleasing the teacher, or the teacher getting appreciation from the student, and how this whole subtle kind of play of attachment and aversion goes on within the teacher-student or the lineage holder relationship. And yeah, so, and again, I have to defer to my other master, Robert Gibson. There's a lot of Roberts in my life. My father was named Robert too. It's very interesting. So that's up for another discussion if you feel inclined, where you said you wanted to go slow with it. I can go as slow or as fast as you want to go, or we don't have to go at all. It's totally up to you. But I'm available. I'm available to serve you, my brother. Okay? Yeah. 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 And so then you have the option of being with the teacher or not being with the teacher. And yeah, my choice now is there's no need for an external authority or teacher, even if there's someone like Robert Adams. I may change my mind if I go to India with you sometime and visit some of these siddhas, you know. But at this stage in my life, there's no quote compulsion or maybe no karma that I have for any external teachers right now. But I like the idea that you would have the freedom to go, come or go as you please without any kind of conflict or attachment. I think that's a really nice, expanded, view. It's a nice view. So, uh huh. Right. Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah. Okay, now you bring me to an interesting point before I go into the rainbow body. Um, as a hobby, my ex-wife and I, at the time, my wife and I, we studied Vedic astrology, which is different than Western astrology. I was never interested in Western astrology because it's astronomically incorrect. Did you know that? Oh yeah. Well, Jonas isn't interested in it either. He told me, Marty, I have no use for Vedic astrology. Don't talk to him about it. I said, okay. You know, to me, it's a hobby. I have fun. So I'd like to have fun with looking at your Vedic chart, if that's okay. Can I get your birth data? Uh huh. You're younger than you're younger than my stepdaughter, and you're 5 years older than my stepson. No, no, no. You're way beyond a newbie. Let me tell you, from what I've looked at your website and what Jonas has told me, you got a hell of a good start. That's for sure. Okay, and where were you born? Can I just use Amsterdam? Are you close enough? You're close enough. That's not going to make any difference. And do you know what time? Do you think that's do you think that's off by an hour or so, or do you think that's pretty accurate? Okay, plus or minus 15 minutes. Okay. Because an hour will make a big difference. So I'll leave this for another time. It might just be fun because you can see if you're destined to meet masters in this life. And most people are not, as you know. They just don't have the destiny. And that's because their Jupiter, which is one of the significations of Jupiter, is the guru or the master. You have a well-placed Jupiter in your chart. You have to. My wife and I also have well-placed Jupiters. So to me, to me, it's just confirmation of what's already going on. It's just kind of fun. It's like looking under a microscope. So that's neither here nor there. That's just, you're just giving me, you're just helping me enjoy my hobby is what you're doing. So, let's go into the material, rainbow body, out-of-body experience, and if we have time, I'll go through the revelations. Oh, I should mention that one of those revelations that Robert Adams gave me during my time with him was this, and they're just statements, okay? And this statement is, and it relates to what I shared with you about Robert, where he could turn his back on you and still give you the transmission. The revelation is, I am the center and at the same time the circumference of pure awareness. It's a statement to contemplate and to inquire is what it is. There's no answer to that. It's just a statement. Anyway, let's go to the rainbow body. So, in 1992, I was still on a dualistic path. I was doing lots of meditation and yoga. I was learning about the nadis and the four basic dual urges of Robert Gibson's, which we just sort of scratched the surface of that. And I also had a Celtic teacher, very obscure gentleman who was the lineage holder from a Welsh tradition. It was actually a Wicca tradition that came over from Wales in the 1600s to get away from the prosecution of the Church of England. And this man was a lineage holder who lived in San Francisco from the 1600s. And he thought he was the only lineage tradition on the planet that understood oneness. That's how funny these lineage holders are. They think that they're the... Yeah, right. And when he met me and Magdalena, I had received Dzogchen transmissions, which I'm going to share with you right now, the rainbow body. And I shared with him some literature about the Dzogchen non-dual transmissions. And he was very happy. At this stage in his life, he was older. He lived in a little house in Kentucky in a little hillbilly town, and he was taking care of his mother. And he would have phone conversations with students, but that was it. He was just living a simple reclusive life with his 9 cats. But he was part of the transition of the cusp of going from non-duality to duality because of his principle of oneness. But anyway, it was beautiful because he, in open arms, he just received the Tibetan end teachings of Dzogchen and realized that he wasn't the only one that had a monopoly. So anyway, my friend Jumpa, who is a staunch Tibetan Buddhist who's gone through all the preliminaries, all the prostrations, all the nandras, he's met, a dozen very high Rinpoches. He called me up in Sedona. I met him on tour a few years earlier, and we became instant Dharma brothers, like we're becoming through Skype. But I met him on my Earth-Wisdom tours. He was going to acupuncture school with his girlfriend at the time, Kim, and he called me on the phone. My wife had already flown to Germany to spend time with Mother Mara. I don't know if you've ever met Mother Mara. Oh yeah, I didn't have any effect from her at all when I met her. I thought, for me, it was a waste of time. I was just happy to go to India to meet Punjaji. So I didn't have a connection with her. So my wife had gone to Germany to meet Mother Mara and also to visit her place of birth, because she was born as a refugee in a refugee camp after World War II in a place called Sigmaringen, which is south of Stuttgart. So my mother-in-law and my father-in-law, my wife's mother and father, were refugees in World War II. They were taken back to Germany because they spoke German. They worked in the bomb factories for Hitler. And then after the war, they lived in a refugee camp for 3 years where my future wife was born. So she wanted to go back and make pilgrimage to her birthplace. But on the way there, she stopped off at Mother Mara's. I was going to join her 2 weeks later because I still had a lot of work to do. And Jonas shows up at Mother Mara's from India, and Magdalena recognizes that there's something unusual about this man Jonas because everybody's gathered around him listening to his stories. So she wanted to get to know him. That's how she met Jonas. That's how we inadvertently met Robert Adams. And that's how, I see the connection? And that's how she found out about Punjaji. Now, I found out about Punjaji completely independent of her from a Dharma brother of mine who lived in Seattle. He said, well, Marty, if you're going to India, you should, I hear there's something happening there in Lucknow. You should go look this guy up. So when we connected at Mother Mara's, I said, hey, there's someone we should meet. She says, yeah, I know someone we should meet. And we both blurted out the word Punjaji. Yeah. So synchronicity has been a part of my life from a long time ago. But anyway, that's how we met Brother Jonas. So anyway, my brother Jumpa calls me from Santa Fe and says, I think you need to come to Santa Fe this weekend and you need to meet this Rinpoche. Now, I'm not interested in learning how to speak or chant Tibetan. I'm not interested in more things to do in order to get something in the future. I was really clear about that. But I trusted my brother Jumpa and I said, I'll be there on the next flight. So I got there to Santa Fe. And Namkhai Norbu Rinpoche is giving a auction. He's auctioning off Tibetan artifacts to raise money for his travels. And the room is filled with Tibetan Buddhists, Americans that are Tibetan Buddhists. I'm not a Tibetan Buddhist. I don't have any interest in Buddhism at that point in time, especially Tibetan Buddhism is, it's very, Tibetan Buddhism is a mixture of Bon. No. Yeah, no, Dzogchen comes from India. Yeah, I mean, it comes from Udayana, a hidden valley in Pakistan. And Namkhai Norbu says that Dzogchen came from divine beings from another planet, and they downloaded this information to Garb Dorje and Padmasambhava and Varakama. This is just Namkhai Norbu's hit on his lineage. And that Tibet saw the value of Dzogchen, and they basically adopted it. They borrowed it from India, and it became their in teachings, is what it did. And recently, Jonas has shared with me that Buddhism also borrowed from the Sufis. The Tibetan Buddhism also borrowed from the Sufis in Central Asia, because Jonas is a researcher. He knows. Oh yeah, he knows how to dig things up, and it's fascinating because Central Asia was the home of Zoroastrianism as well, before it fell out of favor. So the Sufis and Zoroastrianism, some of those elements influenced Tibetan Buddhism. And I didn't realize this, that Tibetan Buddhism is like Christianity. It borrowed from other traditions and fabricated its, 4 schools, out of that. It's I find that stuff fascinating. But anyway, so I'm at this auction with this Rinpoche. I'm just kind of hanging out in the energy field. I was really opened up by my other mentors, and also the work that I did every day on the land was like being given a transmission from nature. Nature with the big N. So I'm really open. I'm really open to receiving. It was really lovely to hang out in his presence. And so I leave. I go back to Jumpa and his girlfriend's house. They give me a bedroom to sleep in. So this is the rainbow body transmission. So I'm lying in bed. I go to sleep. And this Tibetan reconstitutes his rainbow body into a physical body in my dream. I sit up while I'm sleeping. No, I'm no longer sleeping. I'm in the field that he comes to from his rainbow body. There's a field that he brings. an energy field. And he says to me telepathically, I don't have much time. Stop fooling around. Because my monkey mind started saying, oh wow, a Tibetan man has just appeared in my dream. and and materialized out of these rainbow colors. I watched it. And so he, kind of slapped me, with his message and said, pay attention. And I just went, this is really happening. He took his head and he smashed it into my forehead. And our brains and minds became one brain and one mind. And then he pumped the transmissions of non-duality into my consciousness. And that happened all night long. I didn't sleep. I thought he was just going to be a minute because he said I don't have much time. But there's no time when this is happening. It's no time. So anyway, this is the crux of what happened. Very simple, very, very simple transmission. But it went on all night, the same thing. The nature of the mind is non-dual. The nature of the body is the same as the nature of the mind, non-dual. And with the exception that the body can dissolve into a rainbow body. That's the value of knowing the nature of the body is non-dual. And then he proceeded to show me how, like he did something where he lifted up one leg. I don't remember this. I was too much to remember everything. But I have the faint memory of him lifting up one leg and standing on another leg like he was in some kind of a mudra pose. And then I watched him collapse his 5 elements of his body into 5 colors of light, and then he disappeared. I've never even told my wife about this. And there was a Dharma sister of mine who's sort of on the Dharma, the Neo-Advaitic circle, named Catherine Ingram. Are you aware of Catherine Ingram? Well, she also got the wake-up call from Punjaji, the way that Gangaji did. You've heard of Gangaji, right? Yeah. But Catherine is much smaller in her circle. Gangaji has a giant circle. Catherine. Well, yeah, she's quite active, and I met her. Where I met her was at Ramana Ashram. She was making a pilgrimage to Ramana Ashram. I had just left Papaji's, and as I told Papaji, I love you, but I don't feel like I need to be around your proximity. I want to continue on my pilgrimage because this is my wife's first trip to India, and it's my second trip, and we love Sri Aurobindo, Ramana Maharshi, and Meher Baba. Those are our main men in India. We have absorbed their material before we came to India. We love them. And he said, it's part of going on pilgrimage when you come to India. So by all means, you should go. He said, but just remember, huh? Huh? Me? No. I never met Meher Baba. Meher Baba dropped the body in 1969. No, and Aurobindo dropped his body in 1950, but I've read their material and got the transmission from them through their books. And besides Aurobindo and Meher Baba, it was also Ramana Maharshi those are my 3 favorites. Like you had Robert Adams and you have some others. Who? How do you spell that? You're speaking in Dutch. I don't understand what you're saying. Yeah? Uh-huh. 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 Okay, got it. Wow. 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 Now, is this Ramalinga? Swami Ramalinga? Oh, okay. All right. Yeah. I met somebody in 2007 when last time I was in India. My illness had a spontaneous remission. I was fine. Then it came back a year later. But my wife and I took the opportunity to go to India to be with this guru named Swami Satchitananda Ganapati, who lives in Mysore. Very, very, very well respected man in India. And we met one of his devotees who was a woman from Chennai. And I was writing a book on St. Thomas, Christianity in India. And the real story, what St. Thomas was doing, the real story, which was, you know, he wasn't propagating Christianity. There wasn't anything called Christianity. It was just a form of Jewish mysticism. But I think Jesus was an avatar, so it was more than just Jewish mysticism. But anyway, this woman from Chennai had all these old books about Christianity in Tamil Nadu and Kerala. So she invited me to Chennai, and I met the son of her um, companion, and he had a copy of Swami Ramalinga's instructions written in Malayalam or Telugu or I don't know, or Tamil, I don't know. Tamil. Okay, well he had the longhand writing of Swami Ramalinga's actual handwriting of what had happened to him. And and I was going to take that back to the University of Chicago because I know they had a really great language department and have it translated. And I was going to pay for the translation, but things got confusing and didn't happen. But you already have that book. You already have that. Sure, sure. So this is in reference. Oh my God. Mhm. Oh, well, what are you going to do with that? Are you have to translate it, aren't you? Okay. I have a friend. I have a friend who's 80 years old in Sedona. She's from Gujarat, and she retired in Sedona from being a English literature professor on Long Island in New York City at State University of New York. I'm going to ask her if she knows Tamil. Okay. 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 Okay, so you were already covering those bases. I don't need to talk to my friend in Sedona who's Gujarati. Yeah. Because I think that's an advancement of the Tibetan rainbow body, what you're talking about. Hmm. Right. Right. Sure, sure. Right, right. Yes. Oh, wow. Yeah, 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 yeah. Fascinating, fascinating. Yeah. I. Yep. Yeah. It's you have to go through all the preliminaries. You have to go through Trekjo and Tegel. Yeah, 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 yeah. That's nice. See, my friend Jumpo, who has had all the Dzogchen transmissions of Rainbow Body, won't share them with me because he doesn't have authority from his lineage holders to give them. And I told him, well, why don't you ask your Rinpoche, tell him about my experience with Rainbow Body and see if he will bend the rules. It's not going to happen. That's okay. 'Cause- yeah, 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 yeah. Like you. Yeah. No, no. Either am I. You know. Mhm, mhm. Yeah. Right. Yeah. You're gonna die. Right. Right. I think that's really wise. You don't want to damage yourself. Yeah. Hmm. Well, that's why Namkhai Norbu is not looked very favorably upon by his more conservative Tibetan Rinpoche brothers, because he's sort of a radical. He gives out Sutra, Tantra, and Dzogchen all at the same time, and whatever sticks with somebody is fine with him. He doesn't care, according to people's capacity. He said that's the real way that Tibetan Buddhism was taught. You gave everything, and then the person would take what was useful according to their capacity, and they would discard which didn't have any relevance. To me, That's, to me, that's a very advanced way to give transmissions. Yeah. If you don't have the capacity. Yeah, yeah. I mean, so there's no harm. There's no harm being done. You're not violating anything. Right. Well, that comes back to the principle that it's like when you're on a dualistic path, a non-dualistic path is incongruent. I mean, I don't know if you, huh? Oh yeah, yeah. Yes, I see. Ah, oh, oh, wonderful. Mhm. This is really beautiful because what you just said can be missed by being in his presence. Because his presence was so overwhelming that to consider self-inquiry seemed irrelevant, if that makes any sense. Yeah, 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 right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So I was talking about the pilgrimage that my wife and I made from Punjaji to our main men, Ramana, Aurobindo, and Meher Baba. And so Papaji said, go on your pilgrimage. But remember two things. That I am everywhere. The self is everywhere. If you don't need to be in my proximity, which is what I told them anymore, in order to experience this state, just realize that wherever you go, it's there in India. India is filled with it because it's filled with your own essence. It's in India and it's in yourself. He said, go on your pilgrimage with that view. And then he also said, but remember, don't spend too much time around your own proximity. I'll let you just sit with that for a minute. That's right. That's right. Yeah. And so before I left on the pilgrimage, I was able to have lunch with him and a bunch of his close disciples, devotees. Because after the main satsang, which would happen every morning except for Wednesdays, which was anywhere from 100 to 150 people in this house that they used as a satsang hall. Sometimes, if you were lucky, you would be invited in to have lunch with him at his house. And he had sort of an inner circle of people. I wasn't really part of his inner circle, but I got to spend some private time with him, which was really nice. It was different than living around Robert because you just lived around the Gyani, you know. Whereas with Papaji, you had to have permission to actually come in and have lunch with him and stuff. And then, you know, he would take us on different adventures. Like we would go out he'd take the whole sangha out to the crocodile farm. And he would hold court outdoors and give satsang outdoors. And he would marry people, you know, underneath the trees and stuff like that. Like, you know, he would do all kinds of things. Like I had a friend there who came from Sedona at our, you know, insistence that he'd come to meet Papaji, and he actually came and just stayed until Papaji dropped the body. So he stayed there for like 6 years. And like Lee was an older man, and Lee had heart problems, and so Papaji arranged for his operation in New Delhi with doctors that he knew of, and he took care of every single detail to make sure that this thing went fine. Lee had a triple bypass heart surgery, came back, was healthy, and continued on in the Sangha. But it was just an example of how Papaji took very, very close attention to all the details of people's lives. You know, he never just let it open, you know, to chance. So I was invited in for lunch once, and Papaji was very different than Robert. Very, very, very different. I had discussions with a friend of mine who had also been with Papaji and was with Adyashanti for a long time. You heard of Adyashanti? Yeah. Yeah. And Papaji was very, very different than Robert or Adya. I mean, they're all unique. They're all unique characters. And with that, I can share that for another time, with you, what I think the differences are. I mean, yeah. He had more of a fire. He had more of a fire than me. Yeah. I'm just making a note here to myself about something. So this is the question I asked Papaji before I left and went on pilgrimage. I said, you know, I know, Papaji, that you've done a lot of traveling in India. Well, you familiar with Meher Baba? He did a lot of traveling too. He says, yeah, I'm familiar with Meher Baba. And I said, did you ever meet Meher Baba in your travels? And he paused for a long time. He's sitting at his table. I was standing next to him. He paused and he said, he looked at me and he said, Papaji never had the pleasure of meeting me. Hey, aloha, Kathy. Can I call you back in a half an hour? Okay, love you. I'll call you back in a half an hour, 45 minutes. Love you. Bye. Anyway, Papaji gave me a great gift because he threw me back onto self-inquiry. That's what he did for that statement. Yeah. Papaji was a master of reading your energies, reading your mind stuff, and pushing it back onto the self through a statement or a question. He didn't have to ask a question for the self-inquiry to occur. His energy field or his statement would actually begin a spontaneous inquiry, and then he would, thank you. Yeah, and those are what I call my revelations. Those seeds are lodged in your heart, and then they come to fruition, you know, later on in your life. You know. So anyway, we went on pilgrimage, and that's where we met, you know, Gangaji at Ramana Ashram. She was on pilgrimage for her first time with her husband. I was on pilgrimage with my wife, and so we kind of had a meeting. I heard about this gray-haired woman at Lucknow that had something happen to her. So she turned up at Ramana Ashram the same day we did, and I actually ended up sponsoring her in Sedona in 1995. She kind of inoculated the town out of its psychism channeling into non-duality, is what she did. So this is before we met Robert. So I thought, oh, I'm not going to go to India. I'm just going to go and see what Gangaji's like in Boulder. Now, a lot of people don't have any. You can't even hold a plane to Papaji with Gangaji, because Papaji said, she is not a Sadguru, she is a messenger. That's all that she is. And there was all this discussion about Andrew Cohen. You heard about Andrew Cohen, right? Yeah. And Papaji gave his opinion when I was there in Lucknow about Andrew Cohen. I'm not going to repeat it online. I just don't think it's very respectful for that to be public. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, because then there's no I thought going on. There's still an I thought when you've got viewpoints going on, because yeah. It's a very subtle process. It's never ending, this whole thing. But anyway, we ended up going to Pondicherry to pay our homage to the Mahasamadhi tomb of Sri Aurobindo, and we were able to go on Thursday afternoon into the room where he did all his prolific writings. And I tell you, what happened to him, because he received, these weren't just intellectual writings. I don't know if you've read any of Aurobindo's work, but these are direct revelations from the divine, put through his European educated mind onto paper about the future of humanity, is what it is. So, and some people believe that Aurobindo was a partial incarnation of Lord Krishna. I don't know if you ever heard that. Yeah. Oh yeah, I've heard that too. She said it's part of it. Says part of an avatar, incarnation or something. I don't know how to. I don't know. It's just interesting information. There's no way to determine that. Oh yeah, well yeah, that's a whole nother inquiry. What is an avatar? Who is incarnating? Yeah. That's going to require a little bit more inquiry. That's not germane to this conversation. Anyway, when I was at Ramana Ashram, you get all that kinds of this esoteric information. And one of the things that came was that Ramana was an incarnation of the deity of the planet Mars. Who knows? Maybe. I don't know. But anyway, we met with a 90-year-old man in Pondicherry who spent 20 years with Ramana Maharshi. And then he switched in midstream and went to Aurobindo. And he tried to simplify Aurobindo's work in his own writings, because Aurobindo was not for the masses. He's very dense. He's very complex. Yeah. So this man, Manu Pandit, was the only one allowed to sell his books besides Sri Aurobindo's and the mother's books. And then on one of his bookshelves was a little book called The Mighty Impersonality, and a picture of Ramana Maharshi sitting, smiling, with his hand on his palm. And I thought, I think I need to meet Manu Pandit. And we had a little entree from my university professor in Flagstaff, who was a devotee of Sri Aurobindo, and she was my university professor teaching Asian ideas and values. And she said, if you're going to India, you should meet Manu Pandit, who's my friend, living at the Sri Aurobindo ashram. So we had an introduction. So we spent about a half an hour with this man. He ended up dying 30 days later, I found out. So we were like his last interview. And I said, help me clarify this. We just spent time with this amazing man, HWL Pabaji, who was with Ramana Maharshi. You were with Ramana Maharshi too, because you followed your guru to Ramana. You stayed with your guru with Ramana for 20 years, and then you spent the next 20 or 30 years with Sri Aurobindo. What's going on here? And this is what he said. Because Aurobindo was very clear. Aurobindo would send people to Ramana to quiet their minds, because their minds were too active. Because he said, my work that involves with the transformation of things, my work is not about trying to escape samsara and gain nirvana, which is part of the aversion and attachment processes of the ego. You follow me? That's an old school escapism. He says, my work is to have the foundation of the silent Brahman, the impersonal self that Ramana has established, and from that descend a type of grace so that there can be a transformation of the vehicles of incarnation, so that the human body and life was not just considered to be something to escape from, but it was something that wanted to become divinely manifested. Now that's very different than escaping samsara. Escaping suffering, and it is very different than the transformation into divinity. Yeah. How what? How life should be? Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Yes. So that's beautiful. It's beautiful. I would like to meet him someday if I ever come to the Netherlands. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Hans, what? Hans. Oh, Hendrik. Okay. All right. Yeah. 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 The Sufis and Aurobindo would understand this. They have the framework to understand this. Yeah. So yeah, that's good. I'm really happy that you have Hendrix in your life. That's how old is he? Okay, I'll try to put that on my bucket list. Yeah, 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 yeah. Maybe when you come to Kauai next year, we can discuss that. You know. Okay, so okay, so um, I just want to conclude before I go into the out of body experience by saying I think it's fairly self-evident that the neo-Advaitic world that is being propagated as the truth is only the foundation for a much more fully developed realization. And that I think that a lot of the neo-Advaitic teachers running around the planet making a living are doing really good work. Oh, because my friend Catherine Ingram, we traveled with her in the year, I think, 1999, or Graham and I and Adele and my wife traveled with her because once Robert Adams dropped the body, you know what started happening? All these neo-Advaitic teachers started coming to Sedona. Yeah, yeah. They would never come when Robert was in the body out of respect. But once he dropped the body, you know, they started showing up, you know. And yeah, it's the same. Yeah, yeah, it's yeah, like Muji. Muji does that, you know. Yeah, and you know, Muji has a big following in Portugal. I think he's doing really good work. But it's to summarize, that's just the foundation. And if people don't know that that's just the foundation, well, then they end up thinking mistakenly that they've arrived. Is what they have. And for example, when I was traveling with Catherine Ingram, Catherine is a really beautiful soul. I mean, she's just an embodiment of love. But we were at a pub drinking beer with her and one of her friends and my wife and Graham and Adele. And because Catherine really likes just to be in life, you know, she doesn't make any distinctions about anything. You know, she's really true to the Dharma. Catherine's beautiful. She's really beautiful. And I was sharing my experience of Rainbow Body with her and Graham and Adele and my wife and one of Catherine's friends who would do yoga on her retreats. He was an Oriental man. And I thought there would be some receptivity because, you know, we respect each other. Well, this guy kind of butts in and says, well, that's not real because it comes and goes. This guy appeared to you in your dream, he came and he went. It's not unreal, it's not permanent. And I went, what do you think, Catherine? She had no comment because she wouldn't go. She wouldn't go there. So I just dropped it, you know, because you know this man and even Catherine had no context that this was something more than just emptiness and silent awareness, you know. And I'm just bringing that up because here's somebody that's you know out there, you know, doing the Dharma talks, but is not open to there being a further awakening or development, you know. No, I have a hard time understanding that. I mean, but I see that, well, there's just subtle illusion going on. That's all. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Hey, hey. Hallelujah, Edwin. Hallelujah. Right. Yes. Yeah. Right. Right. Oh, no, that's, yes. 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 I'm at the same level. I'm still in it, and I've had the push without having to have an external teacher. That's why I said earlier that there's no outside teacher that I've met. That nature, yeah, life is just pushing me right now. The inner is actually taking over where the outer left me, and that's why I went through this time period of intense suffering, and then recently that's all lifted, and now I'm on the other side, more towards the divine, rather than being comfortable in the empty silence. So you, huh? I don't think so. I think that suffering at a certain stage, what it does is it exhausts the I, it exhausts the I thought, and it just erodes it away. And what's left is more of the truth than if you didn't suffer and were still in silent, empty awareness. I think it's a sequential thing. Um, it doesn't have to be sequential. For me, it was sequential. Some people can go direct to the divine without suffering. It just depends upon. You'd have to look at the astrological chart to see what. Because the chart is the chart of suffering. It's the chart of karma, and so you'd have to see. You could see it in the chart if you're. Because see, Vedic astrology is inherently dualistic, so it's not taught to actually try to help people see the truth. It's taught to try to help them fulfill their worldly desires, is what it is. So it's being used to enhance ignorance, is what it's being used for. That's why I think Vedic astrology and Western astrology is dangerous. It's the occult. And the occult only mimics the truth. It doesn't have anything to do with the truth. You'd have to have somebody that's living the truth to actually look at the chart, to use that chart as a form of inquiry, incarnationally, to pointing out instructions, uniquely displayed in the chart according to your karmas, pointing you towards the self or the truth. So I'm really open. I'm not seeking a guide or a teacher because the inner guide got activated. So I'm very clear that it would have to be a guide that would have to meet me where I'm at. I can't go backwards. Yeah, it would be like committing suicide. Yeah, nonsense, total nonsense. Yeah. Now these are subtleties of the path that I'm unable to share with any of my neo-Advaitic associations because they're, as you said, they already know. You went through that. They already know. They already know. Yes. No, no. Right. 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 Yeah. It's so subtle. I mean, I mean, I'm in this process since I've become healthy because I went through so much suffering. I'm in this process with my beloved wife, who's now my ex-wife, and her new husband, and I see these subtleties that are interacting between them and between me, which are very, very um, egoic. based. And my wife, my beloved wife, and her husband are really advanced souls. I mean, I wouldn't have been with a woman for 25 years if we weren't able to traverse the path together. But I'm in this process of completion of my karmas with her. Even though we've been divorced for 8 years, there's still the residue of our life together that is incomplete. I won't go into the details, but there are financial details, there are relational details with her, my stepson and my mother-in-law. And it's like what you just said. I see this even with my brother, who has spent 10 years with Adyashanti as his close friend and confidant. They had a falling out, which I won't go into with you. It's not pertinent. But I see these subtleties of attachment and aversion and control and knowing, thinking they know everything because they're, quote, spiritual, you know. I mean, I'm just going to say it because my wife's new husband his main man is Tony Parsons. You've met Tony Parsons, right? Yeah. Yeah. I've never met him, but I wanted to meet him because my wife's husband, who at the time was just my friend, you know, he wasn't my wife's husband because we were still married. Because he encouraged us, he said, if you want to go way beyond Adyashanti, you should meet Tony Parsons. And I said, well, I trust you. You know, if we get to England, I'll meet him. But my question would be, why hasn't Tony Parsons guided my wife's husband in the subtleties of the I thought playing its ego games with my wife, my ex-wife? Why are they allowed to actually collaborate and create delusion in their relationship, and their relationship to me? Anyway, I'm in the process of cutting through all of those complications right now. So this. Oh, good. No. I don't want to know. I see everything. You know, it's. Yeah. Okay. Now, Jonas told me that you have the ability to help remove the charge, and yeah, I don't know if I don't think we should do that now. I think that should be separate. Yeah. I would like that. I would like to ask you for that because I want to be totally killed of my charge, so that the divine can actually work this whole thing out. I'm not going to do it. The little I is not going to do it. This is much bigger than me. So I've been through this process. It's a spiritual process internally, but it's also externally a legal process. That's what it is, and that's going to trigger this spiritual process of healing for everybody. So after our conversation, if you have time, I would like to receive that clearing from over Skype. Great. Mhm. Right. Oh, really? Yeah. That'd be nice. That'd be nice. Because you probably picked up a little bit of charge in the way that I was speaking about it, because it's not completely cleared yet. You know, You know, you have to understand, this is a woman that I raised her children. We went our spiritual journey together. We went from dualism to non-dualism. We had, you know, these spiritual masters that you know a little bit about. Went on our pilgrimage to India. And then I went through tremendous, you know, suffering and got ill, and our marriage dissolved, and all kinds of other things happened. And it's just recently that I've been able to have this whole thing, you know, in the last 4 to 6 weeks. It's very new for me, this whole thing. So now I want to share with you the out-of-body experience. Okay. Because Jonas said he knows nothing about this. You should talk to Edwin. That's how this happened. So I'm going to give you a context for it, and then I'm going to do two things. I'm going to speak out the experience, because speaking is different than reading it. Okay. And then I'm going to read the experience, because after the experience happened, I went downstairs and talked into a cassette recorder. I was still in the experience, and I talked into it so that it would be grounded in the English language in writing. And then I transcribed the cassette, and I put it into a 2-page paper. You with me? Okay, good. So this is what happened. I was in between careers. I was in the real estate world, buying and selling real estate for people, and also making my own investments. Real estate world is a very strange world. It's filled with greed and fear. It's hard to be exposed to that on a day in and day out business when you're on a, you know, spiritual path, because it's you know, it's kind of uncomfortable. But and it was before I started Earth Wisdom Tours in Sedona, so I was on the cusp of 2 careers. And I was working at nights from 9 p.m. to 8 a.m. in the morning at a drug and alcohol rehab center in Sedona. And this in the States, what happens if you have insurance, the insurance will cover the $10,000 a month that it costs to go through rehab and detox. That's how it works in the States. And so anyway, it was very, very taxing in terms of sleep deprivation. But I was young. I was able to, you know, figure it out. I would sleep a little bit at night, and then in the morning I sleep a little bit, and then, you know, I just carried on my day. So one night I laid down, as was my habit, around 6 o'clock in the morning. I mean 6 or 7 o'clock at night, and I laid down. I would go to sleep for an hour or two. But this time when I laid down, what happened? Again, I was sleep deprived, so there was something loose about my ego structure. That's why in my previous email to you I said, I recommend sleep deprivation. But I don't recommend it as something you practice. I recommend it that if it's happening natural to you, that there may be some benefit inwardly that might occur. You know. So this is what happened. I'm lying down, and I pop out my 1,000-petaled lotus up the top of my head. I'm free from the body. I'm in space. My awareness fills the entire universe of space. My body enlarges and becomes a whole universe. And at the same time, I'm sitting in the lotus position, and I'm traveling through space with galaxies and stars going by me. I'm in the lotus position. I'm moving at the speed of silence. It's so fast that I'm actually still. And yet my awareness is filling all of space. My body enlarges to become the whole universe. But at the same time, I'm sitting in a lotus position. And as I'm traversing through space, I hear these sounds. And I realize that these are the gods, and they're chanting the mother language of Sanskrit. Sanskrit is the language of the gods, toned down to become human language. That's what Sanskrit is. And it was given by the rishis, you know, for the people of India, you know, for them to speak the sacred language of the gods on earth. And I think Hebrew was the same way. I think Hebrew was the same way. I'm Jewish, so I have a little bit of background in the Kabbalah, and I can read Hebrew, but I can't speak it, because we never learned how to speak it. We just learned how to read it so we could do the prayers. Yeah. So, so I began to realize in what you just talked about in terms of emptiness and divinity, that there are 7 lower base centers or chakras, and there are 7 higher base, or I call them oneness base chakras, and they are all above the head. This all I became aware of when I was, being propelled towards this center of vibrating love that was in the distance, and as I approached it, it became nearer and nearer to me. And what I observed was that there was this vortex of energy, which was just love, that was pouring into this black hole in the universe from all of creation. And out of it was this coming, the reciprocal pouring out of love from the source. I called it the end all, ENDALL, end all, because it's the end all of everything for me. It's the ultimate. And out of it was pouring the same divine love from the source out into manifestation into the universe. Now, what I realized, I only realized this, that was in 1988, so 98, 2000, 29 years later, I have the experience that that's what's happening in the crown chakra, when the crown chakra opens up, is that perimeter of the black hole of love energy coming in and out is actually wanting to come in and out of the crown chakra. I don't describe it as Kundalini, because I think Kundalini relates more to the physical body and to the earth plane. I don't think it relates to the supracosmic dimension that I'm talking about. I may be wrong. You may have an insight that you can share with me about it, but I never viewed it for the last 29 years as Kundalini. But it's possible, because I don't know what Kundalini is. I think I might have had it when I was doing these tours with people, because of the chi in the land, in my own chi would do things in my body, and there was all kinds of things that would be happening with people when I was with them outdoors. I just sort of went with it. I didn't try to analyze it. I just trusted the process, because we would go into like states of oneness together, merging with the natural world, merging. Sedona is very beautiful. So it acted as a catalyst for like very quick, dramatic shifts for people. And I kind of had the innate ability to like read where they were, and I knew where we were going, and so I would like bridge the gap and bring them from where they were to where we were going. And we would enter into these kind of states of communion, either individually, one-on-one, or as a group. When we did it as a group, that was very fulfilling, because it was very rich. So there's a possibility that I never coined it Kundalini, but there's a possibility that those things were happening. These are what? Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I think words are good, but well, they're limited. They're limited. They're limited. I'll send you. I just wrote something before before you Skyped me. I wrote something about that, about words, and it was basically a commentary on this very famous. You've probably seen it. This very famous poem that the third Zen patriarch of China wrote about the Great Way. Have you ever seen that? Okay, what I'll do is I'll email you the original. Okay, and then I'll email you my amended version based upon what things that I've been sharing with you, and it's self-explanatory. And I'm not doing this for anything else but just sharing. I don't. That's all. But I think you'll find it interesting because it bridges the question of, is there more than just silent, empty awareness? Yeah. So I've been inquiring into that for some time, and it's sort of coming to fruition now, and it's synchronistic with what we're sharing. Like there's just synchronicity happening all the time, whether we're aware of it or not. Um, yes, a spirit, a spiritual anesthetic. That's very interesting. So yes, that's really funny, Edwin. That's very funny. That's the beauty of you integrating brain science and technology into this realm. I never did that, so I'm learning a lot from you about that. Hmm. Yeah. Yes. It's gone. Hmm. Oh, no, no kidding. Hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Nice. Wow. Hmm. 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 Right. Oh, wow. Hmm. Let me sit with that for a minute. You know what I feel? I feel humanity is really deluded. Yeah. Oh, right. 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 Yeah. Another way of saying that is that you become everything with no view. Yeah. Right. Right. Mm, I know. I know. Hmm. Okay. Okay. What's that? What do you- yeah. right? But you're saying, who is it that's experiencing that? Right, 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 right. But we've already covered the point that that's not the end all of human evolution, okay, right? And so I want to share with you what this man, Manu Pandit, shared with me and my wife at the Sri Aurobindo ashram when we brought the inquiry to him about how does one know that they're on the Ramana path or the Aurobindo path. And we've already elucidated what those distinctions are. Your friend Hendrix is doing the same thing that Aurobindo was doing. It's obvious to me. Yeah, yeah. So this is what this gentleman, this 9-year-old gentleman who spent 20 years with Ramana Maharshi. Oh, and also, not only did Aurobindo send people to Ramana to quiet their minds, and many of them never returned back to Aurobindo because it was so blissful to be with Ramana. What happened with this guy, Manu Pandit, is people left Ramana feeling intuitively that Jonas calls it unqualified non-dualism. He calls Ramana unqualified non-dualism. And he calls Aurobindo qualified non-dualism, which means that the dualism is going into the qualities of the manifest world rather than this remaining aloof in the unqualified. That was the way Jonas frames it. So this man, Manu Pandit, was one of the handful of people that left Ramana voluntarily and realized that what Aurobindo said, which was Ramana's work is the foundation of his work, and what you just described in terms of continuing on with the self-inquiry until there's no longer anyone there to experience being the center and the circumference. It's just more and more nothingness. So, that's very, very advanced, inviting understandings or realizations. So this is what the man in India, in Pondicherry, said. He said, well, most people on the planet are simply involved with worldly pursuits, the field of becoming. You're just going to become somebody, gain something, the whole story of human worldly existence. And he said there'll be a few people that are interested in just being, which is the Ramana path, or the emptiness path of the Buddhists. And then there are some people, less people, will be guided to have both being as the foundation and then becoming as the manifestation of that foundation. Being and becoming both. And I said, well, how do you know which is your path? This is back in 1993. And he said, you'll know because it's part of your nature. You either have a nature to simply be worldly and to go about, living, growing, getting sick, and dying, or you'll have the nature to find out the key to worldly life, which is the impersonal Brahman or the silent self of emptiness, or you'll have the nature to do both, being and becoming, which is what we talked about, the distinction between just having the clear light of mind and emptiness and then having the transformation of the divine, which, as you said, still requires traces of an I thought. It's very interesting what you're saying. I didn't inquire as deeply as you shared with me, but I think I'm getting it. I'm getting it. So there's that. Oh, I like that. Right. Hmm. Yeah. Right. Hmm. Right. Right. Well, this is what Lord Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita. These are the end teachings in the Bhagavad Gita. He says to Arjuna, who's the archetypal man on the battlefield of life, he says, surrender all dharmas to me, all effort and all pathways, all dharma. And Lord Krishna is the embodiment of the divine. And he says, I will take you beyond all effort and all dharmas to freedom and love. And then he says, these are his last instructions. Become my, big M, minded, big M, and my hearted, big M and big H. And that's it. Yeah, that's it. Recorded 3200 BC in ancient India during the Mahabharata epic of wars between two clans. The eternal truths are given. Yes. That's straight out of Sri Aurobindo. I don't know if Hendricks ever read Aurobindo, but Aurobindo said the exact same. So to me, the divine is working through these beings independently of themselves. They're coming to their own inner revelations themselves from the divine. You're getting it from Hendricks. I got it from Sri Aurobindo. Yeah. That's right. Yeah. And that's something that the neo-Advaitists cannot get a grip on because they're in the trap, the impersonal self. Yeah. Oh, you're saying that? I've been there, done it? Well, yeah, right, right. Yeah. Well, yeah. The whole key is to get a push from a guide, an outer guide or an inner guide. Eventually, it breaks down. They're the same. The outer guide is actually the inner guide. The inner guide is actually the outer guide. But eventually, what happens is you're no longer dependent on a lineage. You're following the guidance of your own inner revelations. That's where it's all leading to, because that's what the lineages were that people attached they were actually individual inner revelations that got formalized, crystallized into, quote, teachings or lineages. And so what everybody is following are the formalized, crystallized views of inner revelations of their founders. It's very interesting if you start to see what's really going on. What I was going to say is, astrologically, there's something very unusual happening in the heavens right now. It started October 25th, 2 days ago. And I'm just going to say it, because that's what's happening in the heavens. Saturn has been in Scorpio for the last 2.5 years. Saturn hates being in Scorpio, and it causes havoc in people's lives, especially if they have planets in Scorpio. I have planets in Scorpio. My ex-wife has lots of planets in Scorpio. Our life in the last 2.5 years has been chaos. It's moving out of Scorpio into Sagittarius. Saturn loves Sagittarius for 2.5 years. But more importantly, there's something in Vedic astrology that's not in Western astrology. I mean, not only is Western astrology 24 degrees off than Vedic astrology, that's a big degrees. That's almost a whole sign. It's almost a whole sign of the zodiac, which is 30 degrees. So it's like 75% of the time, Western astrology is inaccurate. So this transit is going on, and it's moving towards what is called, in Vedic astrology, before there was the zodiac, the 12 zodiac, there were 27 lunar mansions that are superimposed over the zodiac. And this goes back way back into the Vedic texts, where you can read the Vedic texts and they'll talk about, well, this nakshatra, which just means lunar mansion, was active at this time. And so they can date the texts back according to what was happening in the stars. It's a way of reverse engineering history. And so the nakshatras are like the great myths of archetypal myths of creation. And we live out these myths as individuals. We live out the myths of the gods on Earth, based upon the nakshatras that are in our chart. It's fascinating. But again, it's all karmic. The stars are just a karmic map. It doesn't really have anything to do with what we're talking about in terms of the two variations of truth, the unqualified silence and the qualified non-dualism. It doesn't have any, astrology doesn't address that, because when you're involved in that, you're not subject to the binding effects of your chart. They still happen, the prarabdha karma can still ripen, but you're not bound by that, you're not influenced by that, you're influenced by the truth and by the divine. So anyway, getting back to this point, where Saturn is moving towards this nakshatra called Mula. And Mula, out of all 27 nakshatras, is the most blessed place in the zodiac. And what's happening is that you're moving towards what the Mayans call the center of the galaxy, which they call it Hunab Ku. The Mayans were really into esoteric astrology. I don't know that much about it. I just know that it's the same point, Mula, as it is in Hunab Ku. And what that does in the next 2.5 years is it allows for like an opening, a springtime of spiritual influx of energies into the solar system. And because we're a makeup of all the planets, we have all the planets and the zodiac inside of us in our psyche. We get the energetic download of those influences in our life, and in our energy fields, and in our nadis, and our chakras, and things like that. So I'm just mentioning this because there's a lot of stuff going on in the planet that seems very dark and very confusing and very complicated things with the environment, politics, and the geopolitical situation. And that's basically all the ignorance of collective humanity, because there's so much light that's coming into the planet. It's bringing up, Aurobindo talked about this a lot, it's just not something I made up. It's bringing up the inconscient, the depths of ignorance, up to the individual to be released and liberated, but also to be transformed. And that's what's happening in the collective humanity as well. We see all this chaos going on. And it has something to do with the influx of the divine into the earth, which is the next step beyond just the impersonal silence of, emptiness. But it also has its correlate in the heavens. I mean, that's how beautiful this whole design is of humanity and in divine, the earth evolution. There's a correlate in the heavens that's showing that Mula, or Sagittarius, because these nakshatras have three qualities. They have either a divine quality. Mula is a divine nakshatra. And I would suspect in your chart that you have some divine nakshatras. I have them, my wife has them too. And that's what allows us to have the grace to be on the path that we're on. But the other qualities are just human qualities. They're kind of neutral. Then there's also other qualities which are demonic, which are kind of difficult. So the earth plane is made up of divine, human, and demonic forces, all interacting with each other. But I just bring that up because there's a parallel with what we're sharing in the heavens that mirrors that there's a really nice divine influx that's going to be happening. If you yeah. I just bring that up as it's a form of inquiry for me. It's not asking, who it is that's experiencing this or who's experiencing emptiness. It's what is it that's happening on a cosmic level that is mirroring what is happening on an individual level. That's all it is. Yeah. Yeah. No, that's no. I mean, and it's like I'm not really that interested in how the brain works in anesthesia. But that's your interest, So that's the beauty of being a companion on the road. Two roads on the same path. Hafiz has this beautiful saying. He says something like, "Oh, treasure your true companions on the two roads on the path, because you never know when those two roads are going to bisect, and you'll no longer be able to share that on the path." Yeah, and so I'm a firm believer in what this great Sufi saint of actually he's considered second to Muhammad. He's named Ibn al-Arabi. Ibn al-Arabi. He lived in the 13th century in Spain, but he traveled all through North Africa, Egypt, made the pilgrimage to Mecca, Israel, Lebanon, Syria, and Turkey. He's buried in Damascus in Syria. It's a place of pilgrimage for the Muslims. But he's called the Great Sheikh, Sheikh Akbar. And he's considered second to Muhammad in the Islam world. But he was a Sufi. Oh, did I? Yeah, sometimes I don't remember who I sent things to because, yeah. Anyway, he's sort of like the Aurobindo of the Sufi world, is what he is. And he's revered by all the Sufi lineages, and also he's revered by Muslims who are not fundamentalists, but who are really sincere on their path, to Allah. And Jonas turned me on to Ibn al-Arabi years ago. That's the gift of Jonas. He's a messenger, Yes. So what Ibn al-Arabi gave me is what I'm sharing you is that he has a cosmic understanding of human evolution, and part of that cosmic understanding is that we are both uniquely different, and we're also at the same time one and the same. And we're not just one and the same. That's just pure Advaita Vedanta. We're also uniquely different. We have different expressions, different pathways, different karmic maps, different samskaras to unwind and exhaust. But we're also, in our core essence, the same. So he has this famous saying that says, the self discloses itself to itself always uniquely, never the same twice. Like a snowflake is never the same pattern. All the billions of snowflakes, can you imagine that? All the billions of human beings are like snowflakes, unique patterns, but they're still snow. And to me, that's a beautiful metaphor of what's happening on the planet in all these different spiritual traditions and spiritual pathways. It's just the design of human evolution is what it is. Yeah, of course. Yeah, of course. But before it's melted, you have the pattern, that's so beautiful. And you end up having a sense of worship to both the form, the pattern, and to the essence, the sameness. There's a dual sense of worship and love for the uniqueness and the sameness of the journey. So like I can really appreciate you, I can really appreciate Jonas and respect both of you and respect myself so that I can be harmless in my actions. Yeah. 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 And if you can share it with others, as Hafiz says, let's go to the tavern together and get drunk. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Right. Right. That's sacred. That's sacred. Do not do not pass go. Do not collect $200. Right. Right. Yeah. I have I have the same experience. I can count the people on my hand, on one hand, literally. And you're my thumb right now. So 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 this is what Meher Baba says, okay? Meher Baba says he's the avatar of the age. I don't know if you know that. But I found it. No, from 1925 to 1969. That's like 50, 60. That's 60. That's 25 plus 19. That's what is that? That's 44 years he was silent. But you're saying it still requires an I thought to talk, right? Right. Oh, right. A good point. So he was silent. He was silent for the last 44 years of it. No, 44 years of his life. And he never broke his silence. And people kept saying, Baba, when are you going to break your silence? Oh, I'll break it. I'll break it next year. He did that in gestures. You know, he used his hand. Yeah, yeah. And he had an interpreter, Erich. I met Erich when I was in Mehrabad. What a humble man. Baba never gave them spiritual experiences. He never let them meditate. Actually, he let them meditate once. He let them meditate once, and he gave them. This is the meditation he gave them. He said, I want you to imagine yourself merging with the infinite effulgence of the ocean. That's your meditation. And Erich and his other fellow companions that were around Baba at that time, they closed their eyes and he said they were just getting into the feeling of what that was, the infinite effulgence of the ocean. And then Baba clapped his hands and said, stop, don't ever meditate again. And of course, when you're serving, you know, Baba, there's nothing but love and service. Who is it that's going to meditate? Yeah. And so Baba did not tell people to meditate, even though he has an extensive examination in the discourses on the various types of meditation, subject, object, you know, he goes through the whole thing. Not attain, not attain. It's not something you gain. That's right. That's right. Well, that's because he was doing what he calls his universal work. He wasn't, which we don't know what that is. He was doing universal work for the advancement of humankind. And he required what I call it obedience. You would use the word dependency. He required obedience on the part of people that were near him so that he was free to not be just involved with their own evolution, but that he could do his universal work. That's just my opinion. That's just my understanding of the whole thing. But he used to say, if you want to attain something or gain something, go to the saints, go to the wallis, go to the yogis. If you want to lose everything and receive, then come to me. Very interesting. Yeah, yeah. Now, that pushes a lot of people's buttons. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, you know, it's ironic because Meher Baba actually goes through this extensive elaboration in his book God Speaks, where he talks about the journey of the soul becoming a mineral soul, a plant soul, an animal soul, and then a human soul. And then the human soul goes through this series of evolutions until what he calls involution happens, where he gets onto the planes and starts to go towards God realization. And there's 7 planes. Of course, this is not talked about in the Advaita Vedantic circles because they don't believe in planes and dimensions. It's all just samsara or nirvana, you know. So, like, Meher Baba is like very radical in his understanding, but he kind of reinforces this whole thing of identification with bodies and soul evolution, which seems to be in contrary to what he's talking about on another level. So, like, he's dealing with several levels at once, or several types of humanity is what he's doing. He had a what? Oh yeah, right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think there comes a level where you're just living in paradox and mystery, and also you're in, like Nisargadatta said. When I am in love, I am everything. And when I am wisdom, I am nothing. And I live my life between these poles, back and forth between everything and nothing, wisdom and love. And I live my life beyond everything and nothing as well. I love that quote. And that quote, yeah, that quote came to me from one of Adyashanti's very old, long-time students, who's still a very close friend of my brother's, and both my brother and this friend of my brother's who sent me this quote left Adyashanti and moved on. Is what they did for various reasons, probably reasons similar to the discussions we've had on this Skype. So, do you want me to read? It's a short 2 pages. Do you want me to read out my experience of the out-of-body experience that I spoken? Should I do that? Okay. Well, the reason that I want to speak it out, I mean, the reason I want to read it out, is that the speaking of it out is just purely experiential. But the reading of it out actually has sort of an added benefit where there's some practical views or pointers that you can begin to inquire into in your daily life. So like, yeah, okay, so there's like, it's not just experiential, there's actually sort of a message there. So there's, okay. Okay, so I'm just going to read it, and maybe we're going to complete with this, and I won't even go into the revelations, which is part C. Part A was the rainbow body, part B is the out-of-body experience, and part C is the revelations that Graham said should be shared, not indiscriminately. Yeah, I think that's a good idea. That's what I get. So we'll complete with this, and then if you want to, we can turn off the Skype, and you can do the. I'd be grateful to do that other part that you suggested. Okay, great. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of get quiet for a minute, and then I'm going to speak this out. I'm going to speak it out from the place that this came from. That's inside. It's not. I'm just not just going to read a paper. The end-all. Awareness filling endless space. Body enlarges, becoming the total universe. Traversing at the speed of silence. Through infinities of light, towards the center of all things. A vortex of magnetism, energy generating love. A shining, joyous backdrop. A divine heart in each heart. Names of the God principle as sound or sonics. Rishi chants, the mother language of Sanskrit. This is the gateway to the end-all. 7 lower centers are all self-based. 7 higher centers are all oneness-based. And then there is the great lie. No one knows the one in all one sees. Even in this recognition, any personalism is a sabotage of all. The great turning from the lie to the truth of all. This condition of one principle in everything else was formerly perceived in the lie is outside of you. There is an insight into karma and suffering, which is just simply harm to yourself, because all previous outside is contained within your consciousness. Keeping your word keeps the homeostatic balance within the self system. All personal needs, desires, and turnings are subtle form of the lie. It's secondary to the one existing as yourself, outside the limitations of body or ego element. No, there is no objective reality. All is subjective. No separatism. There is no lie in all is as subjective. The conditions out there no longer validate an inner sense. There is no inner outer. The one locks in, links up beyond fluctuations or impermanence of the external objective. There is the necessity of just now. There is the irrelevance of anything but now, and that includes psychism, the occult, and channeling. Constant prayer unceasingly is going on all the time. This is what you are, silent communion. The body temple is an extension of the end all. Full body oneness as the top of the head open to the heavens. And then there is the perfection of all the illusions of the ego, the lie. All events are a functional balancing act. That's all that's going on. In the event, the old limitations impose or trigger, recognize it and offer it up as a blazing sacrifice. Self-inquiry can do that too. Do not be tempted. Treat each person to not reinforce the lie. Associate with those who consciously shall not impress the lie onto you. Of course, you can associate with anybody. You're the only one that's responsible for impressing the lie on yourself, not another person. Compassion develops itself out of the game, the pain of the lie. Nothing exists outside, independent of yourself. There is no outside authority. It's all part of the all, giving back to itself. Whether that's from another person to you, or it's your own inner intuition. It's the same thing. It's all the same. There's no outside authority. And this echoes on and on and on, reverberating forever and ever. So I didn't ask for this to happen. That was my out-of-body experience due to sleep deprivation, working at the drug and alcohol rehab center for 9 months. If you want, I don't know how to, I may use this as a learning practice of how to, what's it called? When you copy something, yeah, I'll find a way how to cut and paste this and put it on an email and email it to you. But scan, that's what it is. I'll scan it and figure out a way how to cut and paste it and put it on my next email to you. Well, yeah, I mean, if you don't want to see the hard copy, that's fine. You can. I would prefer people listen, because listening is a more receptive, direct experience, where reading something is sort of indirect. Yeah. Oh yeah, we could just do it again for fun and just have without all this other stuff we've gone through, we could just have that. And if you wanted to make commentary, that would be fun too. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, there's seems to be some kind of synchronicity going on in our lives right now. And you must feel it not just with me, but with your wife and your satsang group. I'm feeling it with my circle here in Hawaii too. There's some really wonderful activations that are happening. I don't use the word activation. That's a friend of mine in Sedona. That's the terminology they use in Sedona. I would just, I would just say they're like satoris that are happening. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, and things are going on in the stars, which I shared a little bit. It's all multi-layered. It's multi-level marketing of the divine. Yeah, and I would like to just conclude with a Muslim greeting, which I learned the other day from a beautiful Muslim woman from Indonesia who sells jewelry at this Hawaiian village not far from where I live. And she says, Bismillah, 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 Bismillah. Glory to God. Something like that. Bismillah. It's like namaste. It's like om shanti. It's like shalom. It's like aloha. It's bismillah. Bismillah. It's beautiful. It's Arabic. It's beautiful.